when I got married, or it's when this happened, or whatever. But it actually might not be that. It might be, do you know what? It's when I caught this really big fish.
Welcome to Reframe the podcast, helping you reframe your thought patterns, habits, and mindsets to create the life that you want to lead. A therapist I was chatting to once said to me that those who do the best work, whether that be a therapist or a coach, are those that have done the most work on themselves. Today's guest is someone who has done a lot of work on himself, and he is not afraid to be honest and vulnerable, and it's very compelling. Johnny Lawrence is a people-centred, forward-focused life coach and a self-development specialist, and he supports individuals to overcome those negative influences, those limiting beliefs, habits, behaviours and mindsets that can hold us back from not only really identifying the kind of life we want to lead, but going out there and living it. Today's chat is all about how we can create the right mindset, how we can support ourselves to achieve success or fulfillment, whatever shape that may take. Hi, Johnny, and welcome to Reframe Club. It's fabulous to have you here today. And as always, probably the easiest place to start is to ask you to tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
My name is Johnny Lawrence, and I've been in the health and fitness industry as a coach for roughly 15 years, since about 2006. So hopefully my maths is okay there. I turned 40 last year, the big 40, and I had a moment of reflection and decided that I didn't really want to be in my PE kit at 50, and decided that I wanted to sort of look into things a bit deeper and what my avenues might be. And I'm a strong believer that nutrition is very important to us. Obviously, it can make or break any sort of exercise regime, and exercise is very important as well, movement, activity. But what I have been obsessed with from the very beginning, I come to realize, is how you think. Yeah, what are you thinking? Because that ultimately is going to make the difference between whether or not you eat the right things, or eat too much, or eat too little, or get up and do the exercises that you've said yourself you're going to do. That mindset is vital. How you think. I looked through all my testimonials, and it all but confirmed that really I've sort of been a life coach hiding as a PT or a health and fitness coach for the last 15 years. So I've sort of started the process really of becoming a life coach, which I found quite difficult to sort of come to terms with, really, if I'm honest.
Why is that? I'm interested. Why that transition? Why did you find that difficult?
Just like everybody, I have insecurities, I have limiting beliefs, I have challenges, but I put to myself and my own personality, and I have to do the work to overcome that. I had a bit of a rough start to life, and I have to battle against them sort of beliefs all the time. And when you've been in an industry for as long as I have, you do sort of develop a certain level of comfort, I think. And when you then say to yourself, oh, I'm going to go into a completely different industry, essentially, there's that imposter syndrome alarm that goes off in your head. So you have to sort of work to sort of dispel that, really.
Yeah, and I think you make a really important point there, in that change can feel really scary, and change brings loss, and sometimes the things we lose aren't serving us, but they can feel it's safer to keep them, isn't it? It's safer to stay in the career that we know than to put ourselves out there, because the minute we put ourselves out there, as you say, there's imposter syndrome. Also, we feel vulnerable, and our brains are wired to stop us feeling vulnerable, aren't they?
Well, yeah, and it's work like Brene Brown's that really sort of makes you realize that you gotta, or not that you've got to, you should try to lean into that vulnerability, because that's where the truth lies. You might not always like the truth, but I think it's always better to know the truth, isn't it? You can work with them facts then, I think.
Yeah, and I think, and you're right, and I think part of feeling or becoming vulnerable around the work that we do, not just around how
people are thinking and the psychology behind making changes, but we don't always want to face up to the fact that making changes can be hard. We want to go and buy it in a box, don't we? We want, we want to, oh, that Instagram over there is telling me if I buy that, my life in 12 weeks is going to be everything that I've ever dreamed of. And that may come in the shape of a skinny tea. It might come in the shape of their protein shake. It might come in the shape of their endless webinars, whatever that might be. But actually, part of the process is understanding that it takes time and it's icky and sometimes it's really uncomfortable, isn't it?
Well, I think the modern world trains us to be impatient. Everything is instant. If you think about Amazon, you can get things with Prime delivery sort of the next day, and if it's not there the next day, you're like, where is it? And then you've got music. I remember going to record shops as a kid, getting CDs and it not being there, and just that having that feeling of being excited that you got that copy of that song or whatever. And books the same again, and now you can get them on Kindle. And I mean, I've got such fond memories of going to the video shop, Blockbusters, and looking on the back of all the covers of the video. I mean, I don't know how many times I saw the same DVD without even realizing, but it's just stuff like that, without sounding like an old fogey, I just feel sorry for the younger generation that they don't get to experience that. And I think, like I say, we're trained to sort of not have that patience anymore, with us, I say us, I don't want to assume, but we did go to the video shop, we did go to the library, we did go to the record shop, and it was an experience, right? There's bound to be endless stories that you have about that.
When it comes to health, I think that's something that we tend to do now, isn't it? We want to, or we feel like health is something that it's one. I think we've kind of bought into this idea that health is a aesthetic. It is a particular shape, it is a particular size, and it's a particular body image, rather than health being its holistic, wider sense of the word of health. So I'd love to start there, if I can, and ask you, how would you define health?
I love the dictionary definition of health, which is the state of being free from illness and injury, because anything past that is a change, really, isn't it? To be sort of injury free. I mean, when you've had an injury, it sucks. It really does. It's misery, especially if that injury comes at a time when you're making great progress. If you're ill, that sucks. No one's going to deny that. So being free of those two things is amazing. Is fantastic. But I think people take that as for granted. You only need to speak to somebody who's not well, and they would give anything to be well, or someone who's injured, they'd give anything to be not injured. So I like that as a definition of health. If you have a desire to lose weight, or you have a desire to change your body composition in some way, I think that's an addition to health, if I'm honest.
Do you think part of that, you said it, and you said, we kind of taken injury and or being free of illness and injury for granted. Do you think that's because, or would you agree that's because we live in a society that objectifies our bodies now? We live in a social media society where it's all about selfies and likes and external validation, and we've kind of come to rely on those external metrics, haven't we?
Yeah.
For saying that we're valid or we're good enough. And obviously the first thing we do is we go to what we look like.
Social media is a big one. I want to start by saying I like social media. I think it's got some really powerful sort of things behind it. So, for example, if there's a really big cause, or there's a charity, or there's somebody that needs to raise some money or something like that, social media is fantastic. And actually, very often, like this morning, I started the day off thinking, oh my goodness, homeschooling. I had to do a bit of work this morning to get myself in a positive frame of mind, and I stumbled across someone who I can always rely on social media to put me in a positive mood. That was lovely, But I mean, there are obvious negatives to social media, and there are people that get paid a lot of money to take advantage of that word again, vulnerability of others. Someone who's not feeling like they look the way they want to look, or they're not feeling like they're living the life they want to live, and there you are on social media with a six-pack on a bodyboard over in Hawaii, living your best life, and it's like you're like, oh, I thought I was doing okay, but obviously I'm not. But let's face it, that's not real life, is it?
Yeah, but we do fall into that, don't we? That
Oh,
comparison.
everyone does.
Yeah, it's like a default, isn't it? But
Yeah.
how do we, how in work you do, how do we begin to um, unpick that or begin to move away from that as a kind of knee jerk or reflex behavior that we might have around comparison?
I have a theory that no, well, I'd say I can support it with experience of clients. Within my first 5 years of being a health and fitness coach, I sort of was just grateful really to have any clients and to be out there doing the job. It always looked like such a cool job. I never thought it was for me, all them limiting beliefs flaring up inside of me. And when I became a health and fitness coach, I was really sort of pleased about it, and I would sit in the consultation and I would just be waiting for them to say yes, let's go, sort of thing. But after about 5 years, I started realizing that people have to be ready to make certain changes, and they also have to understand what the change means. And I'm a strong believer that someone has to love themselves enough to want to make that change. They want to make that change because they love themselves, not because they hate themselves. That's very important. To look in the mirror and say, I hate what I see, I'm going to make a change. I don't particularly think that's going to be a motivational tactic that's going to hold up when it gets tough. And it will get tough. It always gets tough. Go on holiday. Of course, you want to have as many drinks as you want. You want to take advantage of the all-inclusive. You're human, and to a degree, that's okay. But what I've found is that, and after that 5 year gap, I started realizing that people need to identify, and sadly, not a lot of people know what these are, but basically, they need to discover their own values and beliefs.
Mm.
And once they discover their own values and beliefs, it's the guiding light of everything. So you can look on social media and you can see someone doing something and it might look cool, but I mean, have you ever looked at something and think, oh, wow, they're doing so much better than me. They're so lucky. They're so this. Only to really later realize that if you were given that opportunity, you would have said no. You don't even really want that. It
Yeah,
just looks, they've
yeah,
done a really good job of making it look appealing,
yeah.
So I think, we're at a stage now where, I know when I was a kid or growing up at least, I made a lot of mistakes.
Mhm.
Some of those just normal mistakes, but some of those I did in private, and some of them I did in public, unfortunately, in front of other people. But each of them had a lesson attached to them.
Mm.
And I think now people are very scared to make that mistake because there are iPhones everywhere, and it all gets put on social media. I mean, I've met far too many sort of younger people, let's say, or some people that possibly feel that having 10k followers is probably more important to them than having a degree. Which, I'm not here to judge, but I'm
Ah,
not sure. Well, I don't know. I don't know if there are probably some jobs you can get with 10k followers. But I think that degree is it's not again about it's not about showing that you're smarter. It's about that doing it for yourself. That's why I did my degree. When I did my degree, I was 30 years old, and people were like, why do you want that? And it's like, no, why do you need that? And I said, I don't. I want it. I want that for my own self worth. I want that moment where I get my degree for me, and also really for my children too, so I can show my boys that I did something that was really really hard, and I wanted to quit lots and lots of times. I made lots and lots of mistakes, but here you go. And it was worth it, my big smiling mug.
but you made the point you made there about the 10K.
Mm,
It meeting young people who may value that 10K over a degree, but why do they value that? Because potentially it's because that 10K comes with all that external validation all the time, doesn't it? Whereas our degree
yeah,
certificate sits in the wall in the brain. We walk around with it on a
yeah.
badge,
And then,
do we? Going, I got
well,
it.
they do, yeah,
And
yeah. That,
that's all part and parcel of that whole thing about us being on show all the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, I think social media has arguably become somewhat of an addiction. Have you ever heard of Gabby Mate? Gabba Mate?
no.
He wrote a book called In the Realm of, I've got it written here because I always forget the name of it, but in the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. And he's done a lot of work around addiction. It's a fantastic book. He starts off with case studies of people that have suffered from addiction. So it's a bit heavy in the beginning because there's some really sad stories attached to it. But what it shows is that addiction is more powerful than, once you're in that point, it's more powerful than anything else. It's more powerful than your friends, your family, your career, your finances. And you aren't actually, they've shown it's a brain illness that you don't have sort of decision making processes anymore. You know, you're always going to choose that addiction. And it was interesting to me, it was a little while back, I was traveling with a client to a competition, and we were having a discussion to sort of game plan of what we were going to do. And this whole car journey was ping, 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 all these different sounds going off and off and off and off. And I said to her, like, how much of that do you need to know? You know, like it was Sky News, it was BBC News, it was Twitter, it was Instagram, it was Facebook, it was Messenger, and so on and so on and so on. All these different messages coming off, and I was just, but the ironic part was she was sitting there telling me how anxious she was, and I was just like, well, I'm not surprised, you know, you've got all this stuff going off. But I mean, you know, you can sit there and watch a TV show, right? And I mean, I've done it to myself. I have to be really, especially if I've posted that day, I have to be really disciplined with putting my phone somewhere else, because I will just keep picking it up every time there's an advert. And that's me who's conscious of it, you know, and wants to change it.
Those micro moments.
Mm.
We're all human.
Absolutely.
And even though we do the work we do, we're still work in progress. I have to use an app. I use an app that locks my phone, that takes all my third-party apps away.
But look at that. I mean, we're two people that are sort of, we read about this stuff intentionally, and it still catches us out. I mean, that documentary on Netflix, The Social Dilemma, that was like a horror film. I was terrified.
Children, my husband and I sat there going, we are never, kids, bring us your phones.
I thought we were going to have a big mass burning in the garden, just all technology on a big pile.
But it is about balance, isn't it? It is about balance, and it's about filtering that how we digest, how we consume social media through what you said right at the beginning, is through our values and our beliefs. Yeah. And in making sure that what we're consuming is helping us and serving us and good for us and aligned and all of those things. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I do in every single session is I want to establish a person's values and beliefs straight off the bat. And the way I describe it to them is, like, say I take you, Rose, and I say, okay, imagine Rose is a long road. Yeah, and off that long road of rows is all these different turnings, and each of them turnings represent a person in your life, someone that cares about you, someone that has your best interests at heart, and they want to give you advice. They want to tell you what they feel is best for you because they love you. So their advice comes from a point of kindness, but nonetheless, they can only really see life through their own lens. They're not Rose. You are the expert on Rose. There's no doubt about that. You know, you're with Rose the whole time, even when no one's looking. So when I check on people's values and beliefs, what I'm checking is that when they're speaking, they're not repeating someone else's agenda, so that they don't find themselves down a path 6 weeks only to feel bad about how they, you know, what they've decided to do. An example of that for me was when we first moved down to Cornwall. We were looking for jobs, and my wife got a job as working for a company. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention names of companies or whatever, but she was basically debt collecting. She'd have to ring around and ask people for money. Now, my wife is the single most kindest, most beautiful soul you'll ever meet in the world. Something like that. When she told me, I was like, oh, well done, babe. 2 weeks later, she was in tears. She couldn't do it. She was listening to these people's stories and she just couldn't do it. So that's a prime example of, like, that job didn't meet her values and beliefs. She couldn't ask for that money. She was in, honestly, agony every night telling me these stories of these people. So I believe that if you stray too far away from your values and beliefs, you're always going to be unhappy, you know, and that's why you get these big CEOs. And, you know, I've been lucky enough, or whatever you want to call it, to be around some of these people. and they do really well in business, but sometimes that's at the detriment of their family, and their values and the way they want to live their life. And it doesn't make them a bad person. It's just they got caught up in the machine, you know. And once you start putting the amount of money that these chaps are involved with, it gets harder to stop. You know, so you know, a lot of the time it's bringing people back in line again, and that's all question led in my eyes. You know, I'd ask you a lot of questions to the point where you'd think I was a policeman or something.
Once we can filter our choices, decisions, and actions through that net, as it were, of
Yeah.
those values and beliefs, then we know also we're going to be much more successful at actually making the stuff happen in our life that we want to happen. Because even if on an
Yeah.
intellectual level you think, well, this is what I want because if I get, if I earn this much money or if I take that job, that person's going to think that I have more value or whatever it might be. In here, it's always going to be resisting, isn't it? Our
Yeah.
subconscious is
Yeah.
always going to be pushing back on some level.
Yeah, and that doesn't feel good. And that's when things like overconsumption of drugs and alcohol come in, because as much as it's not a very healthy approach, it does work. It separates you from them horrible feelings, you know. It
No, it numbs us, doesn't it? We
does, yeah,
we distract, unhelpful distraction, and we use our phones in the same way, don't we? We just
absolutely, yeah.
down social media feeds in the same way. Let's think about diet culture then, because obviously at Reframe Club we're in the world of trying to move away from diet culture and have people approach their well-being and their health from those internal motivators, those intrinsic motivators, and look at their health through a much wider lens. In your opinion, how do you think being able to do that, being able to look at yourself and your well-being from a more holistic point of view, is linked to actually being authentic and happy and feeling secure and all of those things?
Uh, well, I think it has to come from a place of being kind to yourself first and foremost, and sort of letting yourself off the hook in a way, because I think if you took the notion that you're at a disadvantage when it comes to diet culture and commercial, you know, the way that these big companies brand things. I mean, I know from recently changing businesses and looking into different marketing techniques, and you know, I've approached many marketing companies, and the question I got asked by quite a few was, what is a problem that people have that you can solve? So I was intrigued by that. I was just like, that's a random question. I'm trying to promote my coaching services, so I want to coach people, and they were very interested in this question because that's what drives everything, isn't it? You know, so what I'm getting at is that big companies, spend a lot of money hiring very, very intelligent people who have got tried and tested science to convince you that you have a problem that they can solve. Like that on its own, like how do you really stand a chance, you know?
Yeah.
You don't, do you walk into a supermarket and you know you know you're not slim enough, you're not tanned enough, you shouldn't have gray hair, your teeth are not white enough. It's just like, wow. You know, you feel instantly judged, you know. And then you stack on a social media influencer on top of that, who has, you know, been given all this money or whatever to sort of prove the point, then it's a double whammy, you know. So I think you start from a point of that, you know, be kind to yourself. You know, if you've got grey hairs, so you know, if you're carrying 1 or 2 extra pounds, did you have a good time?
Yeah,
was
yeah,
was it fun?
yeah.
Did you enjoy Christmas? Did you enjoy your holiday? Whatever, you know. But it's about not judging yourself. It is about not judging yourself and realizing that you're not that person. You're you know, and that's okay. You know, if and that's what it comes back to, that loving yourself enough to make the change, not making a change because you hate yourself. You know, what I found over time is that there's 3 fundamental things that will affect somebody's sort of goal attainment, whatever it is, and that is the reason why they do it, what they're thinking, and the method that they take, how they go about it. And the problem always lies in one of those 3 things, in you know, unless it's something really extreme, like becoming an astronaut or something, which is kind of out of my remit, if I'm honest. So yeah, so I'll always say to someone, what's your why? Why do you want to do it? And if it's because I hate myself, well, when it gets really hard, that's not going to be enough. That's just probably going to lead you to drink wine and then feel bad about it. It's like, again, it's about being kind to yourself. When you sit there and there's a lady in front of you who's a fantastic mother, runs a really great business, and she's got all the, she's a great wife, she's a great friend, she's a great daughter, sister, whatever. And then she's sat in there telling me how awful she is because she's carrying £5 extra. And she really believes that. Hurts me. It really does. I sort of, I know I was smiling about it. It's just because it's so unbelievable to me. I see this fantastic person and I take it on as my job to continue to endlessly, relentlessly reflect that back to them until they see it, until they go, I'm pretty awesome, aren't I? And I go, yes, you are. Thank you. Finally. Thanks for turning up. I've been waiting for you for a while.
Oh, I love that. How does that play out then? Because when you have an individual who comes to work with you and they have that kind of self-deprecating language where they have kind of tied up all their self-worth with that number on the scales, where they have fallen into a pattern of self-limiting beliefs, where do we start? So values and beliefs is one thing, but you just said there, I reflect it back until they see it. But what do you think has to happen in the individual? Where do you think that turning point tends to happen? Or is that different for everybody? Or do you tend to see a pattern?
The one pattern I do see is questioning. Questioning logic. A limiting belief can't survive without evidence. Once you apply evidence, if you tell me that you're stupid, you're not very smart, and I'll say to you, oh, okay, you're not very smart. What's the evidence for that? There's a long pause, and I say, hey, didn't you tell me you had a degree? Yeah, I have got a degree, but, and then there's that, but this, but that I call it going into your stories, which is that autonomous thing that comes out that they said 100 times that most likely they don't even realize they're saying it, and they'll soon realize because I'll start smiling and wait patiently for them to finish, only to ask yet another question. But I remember seeing a seminar once, and this chap said his favorite thing to do is to ask why 5 times and wait for that third why where they say, because it is. And you're like, oh, that seems to be a house built on grass there with no foundations. Wonderful. Let's just knock that over.
It's a very powerful tool. It is a very powerful tool. But it's interesting, that thing about language, isn't it? And you said earlier in our chat about how imposter syndrome, even for yourself, making that transition from PTing into coaching, imposter syndrome raises its ugly head, unwelcome head. But we do tend to do that with our language. So someone says something positive to you, like, you did a great job, Johnny, and you'll go, oh, it wasn't me, or actually, I had loads of help over there, da-da-da, or, you look great in that dress. Oh, no, I'm not sure, it's only cheap, it's only something like, But as soon as someone has something negative to say, oh, well, that didn't go too well. Yeah, that's my fault.
Yeah.
Very quick to push the positive away and pull the negative towards us, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I make clear to my clients all the time is please never put me on a pedestal, because they do. They see you as an expert or a professional. And yeah, I'm really knowledgeable about this stuff. I like to think that the experiences I've had, butted up against the education that I've had, gives me a certain sort of knowledge to be able to help people. But I'm not saying that doesn't mean I'm not going through it as well. I did a seminar a little while ago where I spoke, and I was really, really nervous, just like everyone else is. I have a podcast at the moment, and I'm nervous before I do every interview. It doesn't go away. It's hard, isn't it? You don't know what's going to happen. It's a really tough gig, But I remember doing this seminar, and by all sense and purposes, even feel silly saying this. I did well. I did well. Everyone was really pleased that everyone had learned a lot. This was a room full of doctors and physios, so it was like everyone was very educated and science-based. So I had to be on it when it came to the question of where's the evidence. I couldn't just say anything. I had to make sure I knew that there was some evidence to support it. And then straight afterwards, I just wanted to get out of there. But, you know, I don't know whether you've done a lot of public speaking or not, but there's that moment where people want to catch your eye and they want to speak to you about what you said. Sort of looking at the wall, so I just sort of like, oh, is that a cobweb? Just trying to get out of, like, yeah. But and it wasn't because I didn't know, because quite often I find myself in situations where, especially if I'm caught off guard, someone will ask me a question and I'll just give out all this information, and then I'll stand there going, didn't know I knew that. You know, it's just one of those things. But I suppose you don't stick around for 15 years and not learn a thing or two, you know. So
Yeah, but it's in that pause, isn't it, that we tell ourselves those stories. We tell ourselves those in that pause and that quiet, after we go, I don't want to catch anyone's eye because they're gonna tell me that, or I didn't do well at. And actually, more often than not, it's the opposite, isn't it? That we're not.
it is, but I mean, due to my sort of like upbringing, I find it hard to take compliments too. I find any, what I call stupidly, extremes of emotion. So whether it's a negative or a positive, I find them equally as difficult. You know, I have trouble with connections and stuff, and I have to work hard on that. But it's worth it. You know, I have this thing. You know, when I was younger, I was a victim of child abuse, and I had to witness a lot of domestic abuse towards, or domestic violence towards my mum and siblings. So that inevitably makes you quite a hypervigilant individual, and you learn a lot of mechanisms that make me good at my job now, give me that scary intuition that sometimes even worries me when I'm right. I'm like, oh, how did I know that? I don't know. But it's being able to watch people and understand what's going on behind their eyes, the way they're sitting, what their hands are doing, their gestures, the tones of their voice. And there's even times, this might sound a bit wacky, but I can even tell by the color of them. You know, there's a reason why they say, you know, the color just washed out of their face, or they went red with anger. You know, your body is a vessel for sort of showing your emotions, isn't it, in a way? You know, it's like why people get hives and stuff when they get stressed, you know, in things like that. So I have a sort of unique way of understanding people. I've sort of lost my train of thought now. What was the question again?
You made a really important point there, and I'm sorry you had to go through that, and it's you know, obviously something incredibly difficult, but that experience has led all the way to here now.
Yeah.
And what came out of that, and your abilities now have been shaped by those experiences. And I think that brings us also to the subject of trust when you're working with someone. So I think, you know, coaching in itself is a therapeutic relationship. There has to be a bedrock of trust. And as you say, body language, tone of voice, it works both ways, but it's also that instinctive feeling, this person is my fit, they know me, they understand, they're going to walk this with me. And that's a coach, isn't it? That's the difference between sympathy and empathy. And you know,
and it's knowing when to ask them difficult questions and to challenge somebody, because that's what people that you love might not do, because that's not their role. You know, I know sometimes my wife will ask me a question and I don't want to give her the answer because it might hurt her feelings. You know, it doesn't mean I lie to her, it just means that I don't want to give the answer. You know, but you know, it's like in our house we have this funny little game that we play where you know, if you buy some chicken or some meat and you're not sure if it's sort of on the turn, Caroline's mum will eat things that are out of date anytime, really sort of not that fast. Whereas my mum, she works in sort of the food industry, so her sort of standards are probably too high. So we do this thing where if we want to eat it, we'll ring Caroline's mum. We'll ask her. And if we don't want to eat it, we'll ring my mum. You know, so that just shows you, doesn't it? You know, you sort of, you know what you want to hear.
That is a brilliant analogy, because we do that. We do that. Who's going to give? And sometimes we'll go proactively to seek that negative answer
Yeah.
because we want somebody to confirm that kind of backdrop story we've told ourselves. So if we say, I have no value, or people always leave me, we can kind of maneuver and make things happen so that that becomes the consequence, can't we?
Yeah.
So it can work
Yeah.
both ways.
Yeah. And I mean, it's it's really hard, you know. Like, I love working with people, and you know, I I don't, you know, for example, like personal training, which is a term that some coaches use. And you get a lot of, you go to a lot of seminars or courses over time, and you learn about training, you learn about exercise, you learn about biomechanics, nutrition, all these different things, and there are certain structures to that never change, and there are certain aspects of it that come down to the individual. But I always have to point out to younger coaches, it's called personal training. There's a personal aspect to it, you know, and people neglect that. They don't want to learn, because you can go and you can learn the science of anything, but it's always going to come down to the application of the science, and that's going to come down to the variable of the person, isn't it? You know, there are some people that they want to feel a certain way when they train, and there are some people that if you did that same workout with, you would never see them again. You know, so it's about understanding that, and that takes a little while, you know.
Yeah.
uh,
And
it
that's the
does.
difference between, and I think because, let's be perfectly honest, we work in an unregulated industry.
Yeah.
Coaching is, we've not for certain, memberships of particular bodies, but there's lots of people out there who'll just go, yeah, but then they'll sell you a out the box program. And actually, there's your red flag there, isn't there?
Yeah.
There is
Yeah.
no one size fits all approach to
Nope.
anything, to our mental well-being, to our emotional well-being, to nutrition, to personal training. As you say, it all has to come down to the person.
Well, it ties back in again to the whole social media thing, doesn't it? Where, you know, you have somebody, and again, I really don't want to come across as the guy that's bashing anybody, because I'm not. You know, I think these people are probably very nice people, you know, but you know, when they're on there promising some young girl who's on the border of an eating disorder, and they're telling her that she can get abs in 6 weeks, that's dangerous
Yeah.
and unethical. And you know, it's difficult, because I've had young girls that come to me and want training, and they've seen other people's results, but they don't realize what's gone into that. And they've said to me, oh, I want this, and I've looked at them and I've thought to myself, you look fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, and I swear to you, you can't convince them that they look great, you know, you can't. And it breaks my heart, you know, because what do you do? What do you do? You know, you can only do, and that to me is the hardest part of coaching, is knowing when you've done all you can do, and you don't take that home with you. I've woke up in the night worrying about people, you know, and it's hard. It's really hard, because you're rooting for them, aren't you? And you really want them to do well, but at the end of the day, it comes down to that they have to take ownership of that, you know, and they have to realize that, you know, they've got this beautiful, healthy, injury-free body, and they want abs, and it's like, for what? You know, I've met plenty of people who've got abs and they're really, really miserable, and I've met plenty of people that haven't got abs who are really, really happy, you know. So what does it mean?
But there's
You know.
a powerful question there. You actually just asked a really powerful coaching question. For what?
Mm,
Because I'm
yeah.
not sure. And it's actually when you ask that question that people suddenly helicopter back out a little bit, because we don't do that enough. And go,
No.
actually, why am I? What is my motivation? Oh,
Yeah.
because if I do, that boy will like me. Okay.
Yeah.
He's worth it then.
Yeah. Well, that's the other question, isn't it? It's like, if that's what it takes to get there, then I don't think he's marrying material. No.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So, I mean, in your opinion, then, how can we, if anyone listening today who's going, I recognize that in myself, I recognize I'm that person who is perhaps standing at the top of that road, and I am confused as to which turning to take, because I'm listening to this person and this person and this person, all with their best intentions, but how do I get back to understanding what my motivations are, what my values and beliefs are? How do I come back to myself? Where do I start?
I think you have to look that there are ways that you want to be for whatever reason, right or wrong. There are ways that you want to be, but that's not the question you should ask yourself. Is who am I? What will I do in certain situations? What is my real happiest moment ever? You know, a lot of people know what other people want to hear, so they'll say, "Oh, it was when I got my degree, or it was when I got married, or it was when this happened, or whatever." But it actually might not be that. It might be, do you know what? It's when I caught this really big fish. And that's okay. Own it, man. Let's own it. You know, it speaks to who you are. Maybe that what that says is, you know, I'd been trying to get that fish for a long, long time. And what I value most in life is accomplishment, achievement.
Yeah.
You know, I put a lot of work in. I was there every day at 5 o'clock in the morning, whether I didn't want to be there or not. And I got this fish that day, and I was really, really proud of myself. You know, and so it's about really discovering who, you know, find what their values and beliefs are, actually look for them. And you know what? You might not like the answers. You might want to be a bit cooler than that. You might want to be the guy that goes out on a motorbike and, you know, Steve McQueen's it. Or it might turn out that actually you quite like to curl up with a good book in front of the fire.
Yeah.
There's nothing cool about that, apparently, but I love it. I mean,
That's definitely cool in my book. That's
oh,
definitely
the freedom I got when I realized it was okay. You know, as I got older, I was like, hey, it's becoming okay just to stay at home in my slippers.
yeah. Age is
You know?
age is so valuable. Aging is
Yeah.
so valuable, isn't it? Because it does give us that perspective to say, do you know what? I don't care anymore. This is who I am. You could give our Reaper Income members 3 things. There are 3 actions they could take away today. What would you advise them?
The first one would be, as we've established, learn about your values and beliefs, because they're always going to be an absolute guiding light. You know, you're always going to know. Everybody learns to ignore that feeling of, I don't like doing this, I don't want to do this, but I have to do this. Why do you have to? Really, you know? So learning about them values and beliefs, learning to say no to people sometimes, you know, because that's, you know, there's this thing in this world where we always feel like we've got to say yes to people. It's like that's not okay for you, is it? You know, it's that self-care and that self-respect and that self-esteem, because when you do things that you don't agree with, it chips away at your self-esteem. The next thing would be understand that emotions such as anger, jealousy, rejection, embarrassment, disappointment are reactions. And what you need to get to the bottom of is ask yourself, why are you feeling this way? What do you need? That question of what do you need, put your hand here and say, what do I need right now? Do you know what? I've found more often than not, it's time to go to bed. I'm tired.
Right there, Johnny. Yeah.
And then the last one is make sure that your environment is set up for you to be the person that you want to be and not the person you don't want to be. It's about knowing that if you want to achieve certain things, for example, in an office, if I put you in an office that's a complete tip, you're going to be disorganized, you're not going to know where anything is, everything's going to take a long time. If I put you in an office that's well organized by yourself and you understand where everything is, you're flying. And sometimes I think that that sort of environment that's around you can be a massive indicator of whether or not you're going to be successful, I think. Whatever it is you want to achieve. And it doesn't have to be big things. I'm not talking about being a movie star or being on X Factor. It might just be to, you know, get your kids to school on time. We all know how hard that is. You know,
setting yourself up to be successful to do that. What small things? What do I need to put in place to make that happen?
Yeah, because it might, you know, a lot of people get afraid to be too organized. I think it takes the spontaneity out of life, but actually by being organized, you can put the spontaneity back in life. You know, if the kids get dropped off at the right time, guess what? You can pop for a quick coffee with your mate afterwards, no problem, because you got your day laid out. It's all good. You know, but if you're chasing your tail all day, you haven't got time for anything else, and that's when you become that full glass of water that starts to overspill, because you know, your mate asked you if you want to go for a coffee, and you shout at her. She's like, "Well, okay."
too many shoulds and not enough wants. That's where we can go get the balance wrong as well. And you made a really important point there about boundaries and being able to say no.
Yeah, boundaries.
And I think from a female perspective, a lot of the women I know in my life who are conditioned to meet the needs of other people, we're conditioned to nurture, we're conditioned to give. We can be really poor at asserting our boundaries, and we can very quickly, from a very early age, become people pleasers. And I tend to say to my own clients a lot, asserting your boundaries isn't being rude, it's communicating what you need.
It comes back to that whole, like, looking at the emotions and understanding that they are a reaction, you know. They are a reaction. Anger, jealousy, rejection, embarrassment, disappointment, they are a reaction. And you shouldn't feel bad for having it. You should just work out that root cause, you know, of why do I feel that way?
To finish, if you could stand on a mountain, or as James likes to say, have a billboard at the side of the M25, and it could say anything at all to everyone below or everyone driving past, what would you put up there?
Well, this is another one that I wrote down. You are in charge of your own life. Decide what you want your life to be like and look like, and behave, take actions, and live your life that way. That's you know, it took me a really long time to realize that. You know, it's like what's the word? Manifestations.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know whether I'm all in. I watched The Secret on Netflix, and I said, my wife said, "Oh, I noticed you watched The Secret." I said, "Yeah." She went, "What was it like?" I said, "It was like the best, worst film I'd ever seen." And she was like, "I don't understand what it means." I said, "I absolutely loved the message, but it was just a little bit full on
Yeah.
at times, you know." But yeah, I mean, you've really got to, when you feel it in your heart and you know what you want, like, don't let anyone tell you can't have that, because you can. You just got to believe it. You've got to act that way, be that person, you know. And I believe that, right or wrong.
Absolutely. And they're very wise words to end the podcast on. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure and a privilege.
No, I'm really grateful. Thank you. Thanks for asking.
Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you're able to take something of value away from today's episode. Perhaps one small action you can put into practice today. If you are enjoying Reframe, then please do subscribe and rate the podcast, as this helps us reach more lovely listeners. As always, here at Reframe Club, we are rooting for you.